Welcome to Talking Early Years, a showcase training podcast with Ellen Roberts
and Gemma Carr.
Hello and welcome to today's Talking Early Years podcast. On this episode, we're going to be talking all about SEND, and we have our second guest, Shellie. So, Shellie, can you please tell us a bit about you and what your role is?
So I have been working in early years for over 20 years now. I've only been a tutor for the last 5 nearly. And I've been working in Showcase for the last 8 months now. Recently I've taken over sort of the role of looking after learners with SEN at Showcase. So hopefully I might be able to bring some knowledge possibly into this today.
Absolutely, I'm sure you will. And joining us is also our co-host Gemma. So hi Gemma, how are you?
Very well, thank you, Ellen. Very well. This is going to be an interesting one for me because it's not my topic, but it's not my forte. It's not my skill set. Obviously, I've worked with children with SEND. However, the ins and outs and the details, I'm really hoping that Shellie can develop on for all of us.
Definitely very excited to have you here today, Shellie. So thank you so much for joining us. So first of all, Shellie, tell us a little bit about what has got you to where you are today. Where's your interest in SEND come from?
So do you know what, to be honest, I never really had an interest in SEND to start off with. I've always been really keen on the safeguarding aspects of early years and that sort of area. And then over the last few years, I've had a lot of people within my family who have either been diagnosed with a neurodivergence or there is just definitely something going on. And obviously we know the process at the moment is just so long, isn't it? Trying to get someone some sort of diagnosis. So I've just had to research a lot more myself recently to support my own children and also family members as well. Particularly women. So I've noticed a lot recently of a family member was diagnosed with ADHD, but as a woman, even though the signs were there as a child, she's now 30 odd and has only just been diagnosed, and she has got both inattentive and hyperactive. So when you look at it, there is so much out there about ADHD and boys do this, boys do that, and you'll notice the symptoms because ADHD is where the child is going crazy and it's not about that at all. And obviously I've seen that myself now with this person. And yeah, I've then coming into working as a tutor in the early years as well. When I started back in 2001, I didn't really have many learners. That we had a lot of learners expressing anxiety and stuff like that. And then recently I've had a lot more learners coming through that have things like autism, again, ADHD, dyslexia and dyscalculia. So I've just become a lot more passionate about it recently, doing a lot more research and trying to find ways to be able to support the people that I'm supporting to overcome barriers in education and actually gain qualifications.
And it's such a brilliant starting point really for most people in their career. It always kind of stems from the influence you have around you, and quite often we find with SEND, with people that are particularly passionate about SEND, it's because they've been able to help somebody or help someone overcome that barrier. And it is such a worthwhile thing to work with because there are so many strategies, but there isn't necessarily, especially when you are an adult and you suspect you may be suffering with a learning difficulty or disability or some kind of additional need. There's very little out there in terms of resource or diagnostics, as you mentioned. Even things like dyslexia, for us as tutors, a lot of the resources we find are aimed at children as well. So for us as practitioners in an adult education field rather than the early years education, we always find that a little bit of an interesting perspective too. Something I do notice talking about early years is that quite often the resources are also aimed at older children. So sort of like the post 7, 8 kind of age range up to about 15, 16, which again misses that kind of core early years education opportunity in that window to first of all diagnose it early, so you can work with it and help that child to understand how they learn and where they might need additional support, and of course the parents. But then on the flip side as well, after that sort of post 16, there's not really much either. So it's great that we have the resources that we do, but a lot of us have that kind of specialism and interest because of the barriers that we've faced in our professions as well. So it's a really interesting perspective there, Shelley. Thank you so much.
I think it's very interesting, like you said there, Shelley, as well. It's a lot less visible in girls. And so you are now getting a lot of influx now where it's becoming a lot more mediaized. And people are being more aware of it, highlighting things, whether that's on social media, where a lot of girls are coming out and going, I think I've got ADHD, and signs and symptoms that you might have in those early years age bracket are very different to your typical ADHD signs and symptoms that you would see. But it's good. I think it is one thing for early years practitioners to be aware of those signs and symptoms in girls, in what ADHD looks like for boys, what ADHD looks like for girls, and kind of seeing those differences and how they can identify those. Definitely.
Yeah, I saw an article this morning as well on the flip side, similar to what you were talking about. There's an article that I read this morning about how the internet and how social media is now diagnosing people. So there's lots and lots of people going in for a diagnosis now where actually they don't have a neurodivergency or anything like that, but they've watched on TikTok, there's a video that you leave a cupboard door open, so automatically you've got ADHD. It's working well in two ways, because obviously some people are looking at that going, oh, this makes sense, this is why I've been like this the whole of my life. But then there's other people out there now that are going, well, maybe I've got it, maybe that's what it is, I've got to go to the doctors. And now doctors' time is being used, and lots of people are having to go out and go for a private diagnosis, which when I was looking this morning, you're looking upwards of £600 for a diagnosis to tell you you've got a neurodivergence.
We found that in our last podcast on mental health, we discussed about a lot of people, and especially with the social media influence, it's absolutely great that it's raising awareness and more diagnosis is happening, which brings it more to the fore and allows people to get the treatment that they need. But similar again with SEND and mental health, sometimes people don't understand what's just normal or what's just normal human behavior, or what, it's borderline, ADHD, autism, whatever it might be, but it's not a problem. Does that kind of make sense?
They're not impacting on your ability to day-to-day life, sort of thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. And there's a scale of these things. So even if you do have a diagnosis, there is a scale of that severity and that impact. As with everything, whether it's a physical illness, a mental impairment, mental illness, or a SEND need, or whatever it might be, there is that scale there. So yeah, absolutely right. We see it so often, especially on TikTok, is that quite typically the ADHD kind of self-diagnosis through TikTok at the minute, whereas actually you're completely right, it is using doctors' diagnosis time up, and no wonder the waiting lists are so long and it's so challenging to get a diagnosis through, because it's just so overwhelmed with the numbers.
I think it's also important to kind of acknowledge that it's not always a negative thing, because it's brought a lot of awareness to ADHD, to autism, to the disabilities that you don't see. It has brought huge awareness to that, to us on TikTok, to the everybody. It's made you aware, kind of, actually it could even be that one of your friends is showing some of these tendencies, and actually maybe I just need to speak to them in a slightly different manner, or maybe the way they were kind of quite abrupt when they said that, maybe they didn't intend that to sound so abrupt, or there's all those different things as well. So this isn't us slamming TikTok or anything like that, but kind of it is that it's kind of being aware of those.
It's just the way it's used, isn't it? Yeah, definitely. I think it's really good in the aspect of what you said, where you've got young, like the older generation. I remember when I was younger, there was no awareness of ADHD, autism, or anything. Like,
no,
I remember when I was at primary school and secondary school, particularly secondary school, actually, we had a number of children that had SEND. So whether that was a special educational need or a disability, they didn't join us in classes. They had their own special classroom that they went into, regardless of their ability. If they were in a wheelchair, they automatically got put in with the children that had a lower level of learning. Just because they sat under that SEND bracket. And I remember vividly watching them go off in their lift off to the other class. And I never had a child with a special educational need in my class ever when I was in secondary school. So the knowledge that they had years ago has been changed, and we're watching now our younger lots of the TikTok generation of what I know my child's got it, and he's with restrictions at the age of 11, but I'm fully aware that he has got a lot more understanding of the other children in his class when they have got special educational needs and how to support them. So there's obviously that benefits coming out of it as well.
It's that compassion that it builds almost as well, isn't it?
100%. You see quite often especially in children at any age, if there is a difference, that tends to be something that is almost a little bit feared, and that's when sort of that bullying or teasing kind of happens. It's almost like a defense mechanism, isn't it? So yeah, absolutely right, that greater presence in social media and understanding it being more normalized is absolutely a really good thing. It's a really good point.
When I was at school, so I am quite dyslexic myself, I had what was called special lessons. So we had special lessons at school. So we were everybody, but the school was very adapted and approachable for children with dyslexia specifically. So there was a lot of dyslexic students there. And we used to have sort of special lessons. So we would have sort of an hour or two a week where we go and spend sort of time with a separate teacher who just worked on those tools, those skills, those ways of learning that were not how everybody else did it, and kind of those different tools that I have, and I still use those tools now today. And also that's a way that I can impart onto our learners, showcase, but also kind of just generally other ways of doing things. Kind of sometimes it's seen as the out of the box thinking, but to me it's just my way of doing it almost as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But I don't think we were never segregated from anything.
Yeah, and I think sometimes there is that balance, isn't there? Because the segregation kind of issue it causes embarrassment, and when it's not done correctly, it's just unnecessary and it doesn't actually help. But there is a recognition as well that sometimes children, if they need more time or if they have slow processing or anything like that, sometimes actually it would be more embarrassing, more detrimental to keep them in the bulk of the classroom. So it's understanding those different individual needs and what works best for that individual. We know obviously for hours with our group training sessions online, some learners don't mind it at all and don't need any support with that. Some really hate it for a variety of different reasons. And it's about knowing that individual and adapting accordingly, but without detrimenting other people at the same time. It's a difficult balance. It's something that I've come across a lot in my career, especially with maths and maths delivery. Dyscalculia is actually quite common, and a lot of people don't know that they have it or don't recognize that they have it or think that it's normal as well not to understand, or just think that I hear all the time, oh, I'm just thick, I can't see numbers, it's not that at all. You just need to look at it in a slightly different way, or to have additional materials. But so often I hear in school, I was just never taught the time, my teacher couldn't teach me it. And there's such a, not an ignorance, but a lack of understanding sometimes about certain conditions, which is a real shame. And I think is something that we do particularly well in adult education, is that we try to recognise that on an individual basis and try to work with that individual to help them and help them access education. So Shellie and Gemma, I'll throw this out to both of you. What have you noticed happening currently in the world of SEND? What kind of changes and updates have you kind of seen come out?
So I've seen sort of the SEND Code of Practice. So this is going to include the introduction of EHCPs, which replace the statement of special educational needs. So 2025 sees the year of some changes being made to make clear the expectations of everybody working with young children and less support by chance or local availability.
Something else that's come out of the back of that. There's a news article that I read this morning about SEND teachers and how there are just not enough SEND teachers out there. So these EHCPs don't really get put into place appropriately for every single child because there's just not enough SEND teacher out there. And they were talking again about that SEND lottery. So they're now the Education Policy Institute are now looking at training more teachers and more professionals within schools to be able to support children with SEND and have a better understanding of what it is and how to put those EHCPs in place so that lottery is no longer a lottery and it's just actually something children are allowed to have.
It's very hard, isn't it? You know, having worked in settings, it's often a scene or had conversation that you have with the Senko is, I'm really struggling with, I need to get this paperwork done. I need to make sure this is done correctly. I'm getting the support from outside agencies, but actually these are massive documents. I'm really struggling with what to do here. So I think the Senko training is there, but often also the Senko is also the deputy manager or is also a room leader of a room or is also something else. And I was actually having this conversation with the manager the other day. Senko role needs to be full stop a Senko role in a lot of settings now, you know, especially the larger settings. A Senko needs to be full stop a Senko, not a room leader. So actually you've got half a day to do all that Senko, which if you've got 4 rooms in a nursery, even just one child in each room, you know, catching up with that key person, making sure the paperwork is done, making sure the support's there, is half a day enough for that, really? You know, it needs to be a full-time position. And hopefully, like you said there, Shelley, that training will come on more and there will be that more training available.
Yeah, and where you were talking about the supernumerary Senko role, we know now that Senkos or each room, there's not even one child anymore. We're even seeing signs and symptoms of early SEN in children in the baby rooms now. And I know a preschool that I've dealt with, they had 8 children just in the preschool room alone who either had a diagnosis or were going through a diagnosis. So that the Senko role needs it. I know in my local school, the Senko used to be a class teacher. She now is just a Senko.
Yeah.
For a full primary school, I think I've got about 300 students or something like that in there. That this teacher is now just the specific Senko for the whole school.
But then there needs to be the infrastructure behind that as well, doesn't there?
Yeah, I think a singular person doing it all on their own. Like, we know ourselves, SEND is so vast that even research I've been doing this morning for some tasks I'm doing in the background, I have gone through 3 different areas of SEND that our tutors are experiencing on a day-to-day basis with their learners, just trying to make sure that we've got the right resources out, the right signpost and all of that kind of stuff. But when I was looking at the dyslexia, there is loads of resources, loads of support, tells you exactly what you need to be doing. It's fantastic. On that same website for dyscalculia, it was a tiny amount of resource to support that. And to be fair, it was fantastic because the resources they had was, this is what you're going to see in the early years, this is what you're going to see in primary, this is in secondary, and this is in adult education, which I really like. They actually showed you exactly what you're going to find in each area, which is great for us working with adults, because we will have learners come to us that we look at the work and we look at things and we go, they need some help. What's going on? And we can now, we're not professionals in that way. We're not going to start diagnosing people. That would be ridiculous. But we can signpost them where, like, have you considered this? Have you considered this? And I start signposting them to somewhere to get the help. And then we can then start putting the right provision in for them as well.
Definitely. And we can do that provision without that diagnosis almost as well. So if there is that long wait list, we don't have to wait. We can start putting in strategies straight away because we have an idea of what it might be. Let's try some strategies, see what works. You know, for us as educators, it almost doesn't matter what that diagnosis is. It gives us a steer of obviously where to start and what resources to try to put in place, but it's not essential to us to have that diagnosis. It's not mandatory for us to claim the additional funds, for example. We can put that in place and get those resources there. So I think that's a really good thing that you've kind of found. That's the first time actually I've heard of that, actually specifying in adults this is how it presents.
Well, all the research I've done recently has been, when you tick on it, it is primary school. So there's very little early years. As we know, diagnosis in early years is hard. But there's very little early years. There's very little for adults. And I just found a website this morning. I was like, I love this, because it's just got everything for dyslexia and dyscalculia. But then when I've had a look at autism, even the Autism UK website is based on things from America. So all their videos are from America. All of their resources are, there was a diagnosis resource, and you know it's from America because it's got the Z in contextualized and that kind of stuff. So, and that's as far as I've got. I've only done those 3 different areas today. I've got loads more to look at. But so for the first 2, I could find it for adults. But even if you go around and you look at other colleges or training providers or anything like that, the SEN information that's available to any of us for adult education is almost non-existent. You've really got to dig to try and find something to help our adults.
A lot of it's based on experience as well, and learners telling us what they need, and then us kind of thinking, oh, okay, that might actually help such and such. So a lot of the times our learners will come to us saying, I've got this need, this kind of helps me. So it gives us that bit of a steer. But absolutely, it's next to impossible sometimes as it stands today. It's got better over the years, but yeah, it's a challenge.
I think it's important, like those sorts of things would be quite beneficial, I think, for employers to research as well and find out, and for an employer to know that their learner, that their staff member is dyslexic. So actually, when you send them off to go and do a Noodle Now course, a Flick training, or whatever they are, they know that that might take them a little bit longer. They might struggle with those questions. They might need a little bit of support. They might even need to click, you can kind of click the read out loud question or things like that, showing them that that is accessible.
Absolutely. And it's about for employers as well, understanding what resource there is, and employees, to be fair. So for example, the Access to Work scheme operated by the government, so that is a pot of funding that is available to anybody with a difficulty or disability under the Equality Act 2010. So that covers a wide range. Essentially, as long as it impacts you fundamentally on a day-to-day basis, you are eligible to access that scheme and see what's available to you. So that could be providing things like text-to-speech software for the computer, or we had a learner once who had a specialist computer that just enlarged everything. As simple as that. And it sounds simple, but actually that had a profound impact for her. So when she was at work, her employer would send the documentation or whatever it might be to her computer. So she had a visual impairment, so she was able to run it through her software, see it, and then bam, straight back into work. And it's just those things of working together. That provision is in place under our welfare system for that purpose, and understanding and knowing that there is that access to work scheme helps to cut down some of those barriers. But so many people still haven't heard of it, especially if you don't suffer with difficulty or disability or SEND need. You won't have probably heard of it because you won't have accessed it yourself or needed it. So it's about, again, as you say, Gemma, you're absolutely right, the employers needing to think about their individuals and what makes them tick and what they might need.
And that website that I was talking to you about, they actually had support for everyone on there. So they actually had support for specialists, support for educators, but support for the employers and the employees.
Brilliant.
So something as simple as that has blown my mind today, because I've never seen that before. I've never seen where, because I've been an employer as well. I was a manager of a nursery, and I had a staff member who was severely dyslexic, and the only support provision, this we're looking at very, very many years ago now, but the only support provision I had for this person in my setting was for me to read through her observations after she'd done them before we published them. That was all we had. There was no we used something like Tapestry, but it wasn't Tapestry. It was the days before Tapestry. But we use this online system, so you could set something on there. So an employee could either send the observation straight to the parents, or they'd send it to me for me to review, and then I would send it straight on to the parents. and that was pretty much, I put it on for everyone, so everyone's came to me, so then I wasn't singling out one person. And I think it's always nice to just double check what's going on anyway. But for this one person, it was a really good thing because her dyslexia was severe, and some of the spelling mistakes weren't spelling mistakes, they were the wrong word, and some of the words were extremely inappropriate that you would have put in a child's observation. So having it come through to me, I think it was about 15 years ago that I was doing this, that supported her, but there was nothing else out there that helped her at all. And I didn't understand. I had no idea about dyslexia at the time. So yeah, she would come to me, she'd laugh and joke about it because it was her defense mechanism against the condition that she had. We would laugh and joke together. Looking back now, I would have laughed and joked with her because that was the way that she felt comfortable. But I also would have gone, what can we do to help you? Rather than send me your observation, I'll read it. That was it.
It links so well in early years and in every level of education to both equality and diversity and our British values as well, so mutual respect and tolerance. It comes into so many different formats, and again, something that we've discussed previously on different podcasts, especially safeguarding. We ventured into sort of E&D and how do you promote diversity within the workplace, and the typical kind of response that we get is, oh, we celebrate different religious festivals and that kind of thing, which is great. That's fantastic. Sometimes they're a bit shoehorned in, a bit random, but absolutely appreciate the gesture, and the effort is absolutely fantastic. But looking at SEND and different needs is a fantastic way of celebrating that diversity.
Yeah.
How can we communicate differently? Can we introduce Makaton, British Sign Language, that kind of thing? Have a different style of verbal communication? Am I presenting displays in my nursery in different colours and contrasting colours to aid that sort of visual disturbance in certain conditions? So again, having that accommodation and just naturally and seamlessly weaving that into just everyday life is what we're talking about when we're talking about diversity, especially, and that equity of giving everybody that equal opportunity, but flexing and tailoring those opportunities for that individual. That's what we're talking about, not necessarily just how do you shoehorn certain elements of E&D into your everyday life. How do you naturally embed it for the benefit of everybody in your setting? So in early years, how does this present? What impact can it have on both the children with additional needs, the children around a particular child with a need, or on practitioners?
It depends. If you've got, in early years, diagnosing a need is very few and far between. I have known children to be diagnosed under the age of 5, but they are really the severe cases. As I said, I've got a family member who I've got a little man in my life who is going through diagnosis for autism at the moment, and he has shown signs of that autism since I can remember, to be totally honest with you. When I first met him at 5 months old, I think I saw just something. There was just something that rang an alarm bell in me. Didn't say anything because COVID, baby. And obviously we do know that COVID had an impact on children's development, particularly social skills, that kind of thing, when you've got a child who's only at home. But now at the age of 3, it's, even though we've seen signs forever, that those signs are now coming out in the setting. So the setting have actually got the specialists involved to be able to support a diagnosis at the age of 3. So it can be there, but there's a lot of it. Like, a parent will go in, and I know with the mum in particular has gone in and gone, oh, they've been a nightmare, they've done this, they've done that. Mum's got still learning about the whole process and everything. And the setting will go, oh, it's brilliant here, no issue. But again, we know children can mask really, really well. And it can come across as just sometimes unwanted behaviour. And something I think we need to remember ourselves in practice is unwanted behaviours don't just happen for no reason. There is always a reason behind a behaviour, whether that is something to do with a transition or an illness or a need going on in the background. Those behaviours aren't just because you've got badly behaved children. There is something in the background that is causing that, and we need to find the root cause to be able to then support that child.
It can be a lot. You touched on the parent there, Shellie. It's we need to know how to support the parents as well in these situations, because this is a complete blind spot for a lot of parents. Again, they kind of, I've had children be removed from nurseries when we've brought up SEND because they are completely in denial of it, and they'll work through it, and it would, I've known of that, and that breaks my heart, thinking that that's not going to be supported at home. But at the same time, we have to allow the parents to kind of go through that processing time themselves and kind of go, okay, right, so let's work out what we need to do, and we need to be there to kind of go, look, these are simple ways to support it. This is things we can do at home. So we need to be the educated ones here. We need to be the ones to talk to the parents, say, have you tried this? Have you got that? What about this? But also not bombarding as well, and kind of not try this, try this, try this, try that, because they're just going to swamp, aren't they? That's like you would in any situation if that was you. So I think
have all of the help you need.
Yeah, exactly. I'll give you everything on this 30-second conversation we've got.
Yeah.
In front of other parents at the door. No, sit down, have those meetings with them, talk to them. How about this? How would this fit into your life? What about that? Have you tried this? And having those conversations and knowing where to send them for that support, because one thing that may work for one parent may not work for another. So it's giving them those options and also letting them go on that journey to find their resources too as well, and kind of find out that information with your navigating and guidance as well.
Yeah, I think there's a period of almost grief for a parent when they find out that there is a SEND need or something going on with their child, because when you give birth, when you have this child or you adopt or however you get this child in your life, this child is perfect. It's your perfect little being, and you're going to protect it with the world. And then all of a sudden, someone's going to, I think there might be an issue. I think your child might need some additional support. And your world just would come crashing down of, I don't now have this perfect little being that I thought I had. Although that child still is perfect and is still the same child. It's just now that we're looking at ways to support that child for the world to be good for them, rather than going, right, child, fit into our world. We're now fitting that world to that child. And I've known it loads working in the early years, and I know it's happening now. I've spoken to learners recently where there's a child that's displaying signs of having some form of need, and they'll talk to the parent, and the parent go, no, nothing wrong with them, leave it out. And I know it is a grief process for that parent to break away from what they did know and realize that there's extra support now needed for both them and the child, because it's not just about giving that child the intervention, but
100%.
Parents need to know how to do, like with children with ADHD and autism, they don't like sleeping. Children with ADHD don't sleep. So there's a lot of them that I know of that will wake up 4, 5, 6 times a night, will not go to bed till 11 and still be up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Like, those parents need to know how to adapt their lives to that as well, because it's a really, really hard process.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think a lot of guilt is carried with parents sometimes as well,
Absolutely.
which also kind of is a bit of a barrier to it, accepting that their child may need an additional need, because they think, have I caused this? Is this something I've done wrong? And in some cases, what happens in utero, sometimes there are actions and consequences, especially if there's substance abuse, alcohol abuse, that kind of thing. Absolutely, sometimes unfortunately there is an impact on the child. However, all you can do is focus on that particular child and their need in that moment. You can't be blaming yourself and can't feel guilty. And I know that's easier said than done. But the worst thing you can do is now not address it. That's worse than whatever's gone before. You can't change any of that. If it is your fault, if it's not your fault, whatever. It doesn't really make any difference to that child now. The difference to that child is going to be recognizing their individual needs and responding well to those as well. And you're absolutely right. There is that almost counselling process for parents to overcome that kind of the guilt and that grief process of, my child is different and my life is now going to be different, to help them understand actually the world hasn't collapsed around you. It's okay. We are here to support you as practitioners and as educators.
I think also talking about the child's individual needs, and again, it's hard in early years, but listening to that child and what that child wants as well. So often we go, oh, there could be ADHD there. Right, let's do this, this, and this. And actually the child goes, what?
Yeah.
And sometimes that transition can almost be bigger for them,
Yes.
you know, and actually I was kind of ticking along okay. Like, yeah, sure, there might be tendencies, but is it hugely impacting them? Is it delaying them? Is there a need to put in 5 million different things onto an EHCP for the child? Or do we just kind of let them kind of tick along and they are processing everything themselves, so just kind of being aware of their child's needs, or having that conversation if you can, if they are that bit older, having that conversation with them and kind of going, okay, how do you want your nursery day to look? Do you like it when we do this? Do you not like it when we do that? Just having those conversations about it, because again, like you said, home life can be seen differently. So there's some things that they show at home might not be shown at nursery, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
Where do practitioners, parents, and children themselves, where do we go for information and resource? Where do we even start?
I think the biggest thing that we are always told to do is NHS website, isn't it? If there's ever some sort of need, there is also always, you'll find the signs and symptoms of a condition, whether that is an illness or a special educational need or whatever it might be. NHS website is always a really good one. But then there's every condition that someone can have has a charity behind it.
Yeah.
And those charities have, some of them have got fantastic websites. As I said to you this morning, Dyslexia UK, fantastic website. Autism UK was a really, really good website as well. There's also like other charities in the background, like parents have set up when their child has had a need or something like that. They're really good. I think Facebook pages as well, but again, with those, you've got to take a pinch of salt. You'll go on and you'll say, right, my child's not sleeping, say. And then you'll have 1,000 people come back to you and go, do this, give this medication, do this. Even like with children as babies, I remember when children weren't sleeping as babies, oh, have you tried putting a bit of porridge in their bottle? All of those kind of things. We know the NHS advice is not to do that. That's not what. That's not okay. Don't clog up your child's bottle with a bit of porridge. So things like NHS, those reputable .orgs. Bit of a .org website. That's what we're looking for. And if we do go onto Facebook, just remembering what people are saying is not gospel.
I think your Senko, your setting Senko is always very good as well. Again, for the early years, like we've kind of spoken about, it's that first-hand experiences, which your Senko will have as well. So we may have had a child 4 years ago that actually we did this with, that really helped them. So it's those kind of things that we can bring in. Also .gov website can be really good for, yes, they've got all of the legislation-y stuff, but they can signpost through to other bits and bobs as well. Local councils, healthcare providers, and the parents. So the parents can often know what's right for that child, and actually that works, that doesn't, those kind of things, those conversations to be having with the parents as well. Because, you've got some children who are born with SEND needs. So they've known from day dot that their child is going to have special educational needs. Therefore, they've done all of that research. They tell you how to best support that child, how best to encourage them to eat their meals, even just things like that, So those situations, parents would 100% be best option.
Is there anything else or any other advice or guidance you can offer for our listeners today?
I think it really is just making sure you do that right research, but being open and understanding the feelings and emotions of people, because whether you are an adult that's being diagnosed with something, as we're seeing a lot nowadays, or whether your child is going through something, there's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of feels going on, isn't there, when you find out, as I said, the grown adult that with ADHD knew the whole way through her life that there was something amiss with her, but finally getting a doctor to write down on a bit of paper, here is a diagnosis, even though she knew the whole way through that there was something, getting that diagnosis hit like a ton of bricks. And it was a case of, oh my God, there really is something. And it was a relief of everything that she'd been through childhood, through schooling, through doctors and nurses saying good luck to the parents at the 18 months old check. Like they literally said good luck because of how much of a live wire she was as a child. All of that, and having issues in school, not wanting to go to school, which then at the age of 30 odd going, I've got this. It just all made sense, and everything, the whole weight was just lifted because everything in my life made sense now. That it was one of those realizations for her. So I think being open, understanding, and sometimes not even giving your opinion, just sit there and go, okay, rant, tell me how you feel, and let that person deal with it in the way that they want to, and then signposting if need be. There's so many organisations out there that can help.
Gemma, what advice would you give?
My advice would be, don't let it stop you. So don't use your disability or your specific needs as, for want of a better word, an excuse not to do something. Don't let it stop you. Personally, I sit here with an early years degree, being very dyslexic. My brother's got a Master's of Engineering with more severe dyslexia than I do. I've got a lot of friends with ADHD and have completely followed where they want to go. They know exactly where they want to be, and it's actually been a bit of a driving force for them. And I don't ever like to hear or see people using it as a reason not to go somewhere or not to do something. So that is my piece of advice.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, thank you both of you. It's been such an enjoyable conversation today for a topic that is challenging, and I think challenging for some people to talk about. I feel that it was quite an empowering conversation we've had today about from everything from resources to support and how it manifests. And I think it's a really important thing to keep those conversations going and start recognizing that this is everyday life. This is something that we are dealing with every single day on different scales completely, but it's something that we can embed into our practice and make into a positive. It's a can situation, not a can't, as you say.
Definitely. Shellie, one question that we like to ask all of our guests is, what was your dream job when you were a child and why?
You're going to laugh at this one. I wanted to be an accountant.
Really?
I really wanted to be an accountant. So I'd lined up work experience for myself in year 10, and I wanted to be an accountant. And then I realised at the time I didn't have great support in maths. Okay, this is going back to the conversation at the very beginning. My support in maths at school was horrific. Our teachers were not very good in the slightest, and I hated maths, and I very much had that can't do attitude. And the moment I realised that accounting involved quite a bit of maths, I went, not going to do that now. But I could have been on a lot of money now. I could have been like up in the
up in the city,
accounts management, all of that kind of stuff. But actually, I followed something that was my dream. I work with children, and actually then working with adults. I loved working with children, don't get me wrong, but I absolutely adore imparting the knowledge that I've got over the last 20 odd years into now this next generation that are coming in. And not even the next generation, we have much older people coming into apprenticeships as well, but I love imparting the knowledge that I've got then. And weirdly, on a U-turn, I love maths now. I don't want to be an accountant anymore.
Don't jump ship to be an accountant now, though. I wouldn't.
Teaching maths as part of what we do, I love it, and I love just seeing those learners who go, I can't do it, I hate maths, go, I've got it. Yeah, it's literally one of my favourite parts of this job now.
I love that.
What a brilliant answer. Absolutely love that. 360. So you never know when maths is going to come up in your life, and it might be beneficial, and you might end up loving it.
I'm saying I came out of school without a GCSE in maths, and I now have my qualification. So if anyone says that they can't do it, you really can.
There we go.
Absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in today. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the topics we covered, or answer any questions that you might have about what we discussed. Your input really does help shape our conversations.
So don't forget to like, share and follow this podcast to stay updated. And as always, let's keep the conversation going about early years. Until next time, take care and keep making a difference.